just after 3 in the morning in Brussels. 4 phones are buzzing on a nightstand in a small flat above a Polish deli. A young man lies half awake in his childhood bedroom, thumbing out messages to players on the other side of the world. In Thailand, it's already morning. A small tournament is about to begin, and he has one last match to arrange before the sun comes up. What he doesn't know is that a police team is already on its way to his street. This man never held a professional ranking. He never played a single tour-level match in his life. And yet from that bedroom, he had quietly become one of the most powerful figures in the entire sport of tennis, the hidden hand behind at least 375 rigged matches, with a roster of more than 180 professional players across 5 continents. His name was Grigor Sargsyan. In the tennis underworld, they called him the Maestro. Before we get into it, if you're enjoying it so far, a subscribe would mean a lot. When people say the biggest scandal in tennis, they usually picture a failed drug test or a famous name. But by sheer scale, by the number of players corrupted and matches fixed, nothing comes close to what a lawyer for professional tennis later called the biggest match-fixing operation in the sport's history. The raid, the courtroom, the sentence, that's only the end. To understand how a broke law student turned the most genteel sport on earth into a rigged casino, we have to go back years. Back to a single, simple question he asked himself at the time. A question that sounds harmless, until you see what it costs. Let's get into it. To understand the Maestro, you first have to understand the sport he found himself in. When you watch tennis, you watch the very top. The finals, the trophies, the sold-out arenas. That world is impossibly rich. But it sits on top of a vast, invisible base. Thousands of professionals ranked far outside the top 300, players you will never once see on television. These are the people grinding through the lowest rungs of the sport. The futures and challenger circuits, tiny events in half-empty clubs, little prize money, no cameras, almost no oversight. Many of them lose money just by showing up. Flights, hotels, stringing, coaching, all out of their own pocket. And a lot of them can barely afford to keep going. This is exactly where the problem starts. Now ask yourself a cold question. If a stranger offered one of these players more cash to lose a single game than they'd earn by winning the whole tournament, how many would truly say no? That was the crack in the foundation. And the Maestro exploited that weakness without mercy. The story begins around 2014 in Brussels, with a law student and a circle of friends who liked to bet on sports. Sargsyan wasn't a tennis obsessive. He was a problem solver. He looked at sports betting and asked the question every gambler secretly asks: what if it wasn't a gamble at all? What if you already knew the result? In most sports, that's a fantasy. Too many players, too much money, too many eyes. But in the basement of tennis, he found perfect conditions. Here, a single player can decide the outcome of a small match entirely by himself. And a lot of those players were desperate enough to at least hear the Maestro out. So he approached one, then another. He wasn't buying whole careers. He was buying moments. Lose this game, drop this set, miss on this one point. Small, deniable, nearly invisible things. In matches barely anyone was watching anyway. Then a network of associates would place the bets, spread across the world, on outcomes that had already been decided, and it worked. One player became 5, 5 became dozens. Dozens became more than 180. What had started as a single fixed match had grown into a full network. Sargsyan ran it like a business. Everything coordinated through encrypted messaging, money moving quietly across borders. New countries added the way a franchise opens new stores. The young man who started with almost nothing was soon pulling in millions, and nobody knew his name. But in the shadows, he had become the most influential person in professional tennis. The bigger the network grew, the bigger the risk of getting caught. Because an empire built in the dark needs only a single light to come apart. Tennis has its own anti-corruption investigators, and they'd picked up a tip about a young Egyptian player who seemed to be trading suspicious messages with a fixer. They confronted him. They seized his phone. On it, they found a contact in Brussels, a first name, a number. Nothing more. The information was passed to the Belgian Federal Police, who were already chasing a lead of their own. They'd been tracking a strange pattern of bets flowing out of Belgium, and now suddenly, two separate investigations were pointing at the same shadow. From that moment on, the Belgian investigators refused to let go. They built a surveillance operation. For nearly a year, they watched the maestro, and slowly the invisible man took shape. They documented his near-daily trips to Paris, where he'd duck into restaurants near the train stations to hand players their envelopes of cash. They saw the day a bag stuffed with money arrived from Armenia, and how Sargsyan took it without a flicker of hesitation. Piece by piece, a suspicion became a chain of evidence. The net was tightening, and while the investigators closed in on the truth, the maestro stayed oblivious. Then came June 2018, and all at once, everything collapsed. On the same day, coordinated raids struck several countries, and one team moved on that little flat above the deli, the same childhood bedroom where the whole thing had begun. On the morning they came for him, the maestro was still working, still messaging players, still arranging one last result. When the officers came through the door, he lunged for his phones, and it's that single reflex that gave him away completely, because nobody on Earth understood better than he did what those phones held. He didn't reach them in time. And with that, the verdict was sealed. Those phones were the entire operation written down, thousands of messages, betting records, bank transfers, years of it, neatly ordered. Investigators even found search histories in which Sargsyan had Googled himself, searched for match fixing, searched the words Armenian Mafia, as if he were trying to grasp for himself what he had built. Now nobody had to go looking anymore. The network was no longer hidden in the shadows. The maestro's music had stopped. It took years to reach trial. When it finally came in 2023, a Belgian court handed Sargsyan a 5-year prison sentence for leading a criminal organization, for money laundering, and for fraud. More than 24 associates were pulled into the case alongside him. On his way out of the courtroom, he reportedly warned a journalist that far more people should have been standing trial that day. Then he went home, back to the flat above the deli, back to hauling boxes for the family shop, the very work he'd been doing before any of it began. But here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Catching the maestro did not end the problem. In the years since, tennis authorities have kept handing down bans tied to the very same network, including a wave of players sanctioned in 2025, with punishments ranging from a couple of years to a lifetime ban, and at least one player linked to more than 100 separate fixing offenses. The door he walked through is still wide open. So what's the truth about the biggest cheating scandal in tennis history? It was never really about one man. One man simply proved how easy it can be. He showed the world that if a sport leaves hundreds of its own athletes broke enough and unwatched enough for long enough, someone will always come along to buy the result. And that leaves an uncomfortable question hanging over every quiet, early round match you've half-watched on some afternoon. How many of them were genuinely real? Tell me honestly in the comments, do you think the sport is actually cleaner now? Or has it just gotten better at looking clean? I have a feeling this conversation is going to get interesting, and if this pulled you in, subscribing really does help the channel more than you'd think. Drop a like for more deep dives like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.